I'm Alex Gossi with Magically Resin. This week's topic of the week is safety when using craft resin, and really safety when using all resin. They all have similar properties and similar pitfalls, and while craft resin is far superior to every other resin I had ever worked with from a safety perspective, there's lots of things to consider and things to take into advisement. First, it's very important that you wear a respirator. When working with any resin, it's very important that you don't breathe in any fumes that there may be, not just from the resin, but from alcohol ink, from mica powder. There's a wide variety of things that you use in conjunction with resin that should not be breathed in. So it is so much safer to just wear your respirator when you're doing any type of work with resin, with cement. I do a lot of cement work and I always have my respirator on for that. So basically any of these activities that are in conjunction with resin, even though craft resin is so safe and has such rigid safety standards. So that's the first thing. Next, I also think it's important to wear goggles. It is really it's really possible that while you're mixing something that you can get a little bubble pop up, and again, because I do cement, this actually does happen with cement, and your eyes are so precious, so it's really great to keep safety goggles on so that you don't get anything in your eyes. And also, you're not likely to put your gloves in your eyes because sometimes when you're busy you might be distracted. So that brings me to the next thing. Gloves on your hands, absolutely necessary. I think that this is vital to not get resin on your skin, even if you're careful. And additionally, I think it's incredibly important to consider where you pour resin and where you cure your resin, because it does have the long cure time. And in that cure time, little fingers or little paws can get in the resin and you may not know it. I also really find it great to wear resin clothing. So while I try really hard not to get resin on my clothing, what I want to know is if I do get resin on my clothing, that I can see it. So I really like the cotton t-shirts to the old cotton undershirts to wear while I do resin, because when resin lands on it, you can see it. So I know that there's resin there so it doesn't get spread to anything else. It doesn't get spread to another part of the house. And I put on and take off my respective resin shirt when I come in to do my resin work, so that I also know that if I don't see that the resin landed on whatever I'm wearing, that I'm not carrying it around my house, because I have pets and cats and dogs and oh my. So I don't want anybody to get it on their fur or anything like that. And I don't want to get it on mine. So, well, I don't have fur, but my skin. So that's another tip that I consider very important in resin safety. Last, I really like to protect my workspace. I do not want to get resin willy-nilly all over the place, and I like having a very pristine, clean workspace that I may do 5 or 6 pours in a day. I may have a bunch of orders coming in, and I don't want one color to get into something else, and I don't want there to be any transfer at all. So I also don't like to spend more time cleaning than I have to. So I really like to have a plastic sheet down on top of a glass mat on top of my heating mat, and lots of times I'll keep the plastic sheet clean just by wiping it off to pick up any resin that drops at the time. So I like having a very clean workspace, and I like having a plastic workspace on top of my glass, even though ultimately, even glass, you can get resin off of glass after it sets, but it's not so easy to get uncured resin off of glass. So that would be the tips that I would tell you that I think are very important for working with craft resin safely. So if you take these safety precautions, you can have a wonderful time playing with your resin and know that you're safe and that your pets are safe, and that you don't have to worry about any kind of future problems because you've taken the precautions that you need so that you can really enjoy resin, because it is so fun. We all just love our resin. I thought I would throw in a short tutorial today as well to give y'all something to inspire you going into the week and maybe to try something new. I am so in love with this marble technique right now that Chrissy from Stand Together UK introduced me to. And it is just so fun and so great for so many different colors. But I really, really love this black mica powder. The mica that I'm using is Craft Resin's black mica powder, but I put it in a larger container so that it's easier for me to get out. I really like to mix my mica in very, very well. I have found that for me, if I don't mix it in incredibly well, that I get pockets that the powder didn't mix and they come to the top and they make weird bubbles, or you get strange striations. So it can affect the cure, especially the surface of the curing resin. So I really, really go out of my way to make sure and mix it in, and then I check and double check with the stir stick to bring it up from the bottom to make sure that there isn't any mica in there that's still dry. So that's me, just mix. But I think it's really important when you're working with dry mica. So I wanted the edge of this to be this black mica color, and then I wanted the marble to kind of fade into it. So I also like to always, when pouring this type of mold, pour my first layer of resin, whether I'm doing a two-tone or not. I like to put in a bit of resin so that I can make sure and squish out any air bubbles, because there's always air bubbles in this one. So I'm going around the edge and just carefully putting in just that first slight layer of black. And I really want that to slide down the edge, and I want to squish all the air bubbles out before I add more resin. And when I add the next layer of resin, I'll still leave a lot of space for air bubble removal, because the last thing you want to do is be squishing out the air bubbles and you're squishing resin all over the place, because who wants to make more of a mess? And seriously, I'm terribly messy as it is. Right on cue. So I'm adding Pinata white alcohol ink, and I'm adding 2 or 3 drops of silicone oil. I probably add a little more silicone oil than I think the average person does, and I haven't found any adverse effects with that so far, but I know that others have. So probably important to test for your own perspective, and probably all silicone is a little bit different depending on, I may not be using the same product that somebody else is. But this is what works for me, but you should test to see what works for you. I know Chrissy only puts in 1 or 2 drops of silicone, and hers may be a higher percentage, who knows. So, that's just the black mica, the white alcohol Pinata ink, and the silicone drops. And now I am ever so slightly mixing it in. I want this to be very marbled. I'm actually pouring this as a custom order for my Etsy shop, and she wanted this to be a very distinct marble. So I definitely did not want this to blend in too much. And I already have black in the bottom, so I'm aware that I really want the white to have cells and to make that pretty marble look, but not to get muddy or to turn gray. You'll see as I'm pouring this that I'm pouring in little circles. I like the visual that the little circles gives when landing. I feel like that adds something really pretty to the marble. So this is a a personal preference technique. I've seen this done a lot of different ways, and there are a bunch of really good videos on Craft Resin about this technique because we all just really love it. So the circular, very slight circular motion is just to get the mica to lay down in a particular way and to get it to pour and leave the texture that I want. I'm also pouring a ring holder at the same time, so that's what you see me doing right now. I am going to put a bunch of quartz crystals in that ring holder. I find that the feather is not deep enough to add a bunch of quartz crystals to, and the customer did not want them in the feather. So they're poured a little bit differently, but it's the same idea with the technique, and you'll see at the end the outcome is a little bit different too. The ring holder has a very much more quartz, actual stone feel to it, and they both just turned out beautiful. Now you want to be careful here at the end when you start to get to the bottom of your cup, and you really don't want to make your piece muddy. So it's important to be careful how you finish off your cup, and if you're concerned about it getting muddy, go ahead and stop and just let it sit. If you need to fill it up with more resin, you can always, in most cases, add clear resin or finish it up in a little bit without muddying the whole effect after it has a bit of time to cure. So that's me putting in the quartz crystal to the ring holder and squishing to get it to the bottom and to get rid of any air bubbles that are going to be trapped in it and that kind of thing. So my plan with the ring holder is to do a two-tone effect. I want the bottom to be more translucent and a lighter color and not to be so marble so that you can actually see the quartz crystals. So I finished it up by spraying it with alcohol ink, and I'm so thrilled with how this turned out. This marble technique is so beautiful. This is really zoomed in tight, but it's because it's so subtle that it would have been almost impossible to film without being zoomed in so tight. So I just think this is so gorgeous. The way that this effect turned out I'm ecstatic. And here you can see what I meant about the bottom being a lighter color and then the top having the darker, but you can see the quartz crystals. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Making these videos for y'all has been so much fun, and I have learned so much. Please be sure and like and subscribe, and if you have any thoughts or ideas or questions, leave them in the comments, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you have or try and do any tutorials that you might be interested in or have questions about.